Okay. NTSB accent plan. Ronald A. Gower RV12. This is interesting because it just goes to show that what we have here is a Vans RV, but when you build a experimental aircraft, you can name it whatever you want. You don't have to name it by the kit manufacturer. Anyways, this guy named it after himself. Ronald A. Gower. Anyways, that's the name. November 6, 2020. Mechanical failure. No injuries. That's good. In Byron, California. I'm reading this for the first time, just like you. We're on aerotel.com having a look at an NTSB report of an RV-12 that had a mechanical issue. Let's read the synopsis. This was a little RV-12 taking off. An RV-12. Wow. I'm losing it here. I haven't been doing any videos because I have been sick and couldn't really talk without hacking up. So, an RV-12 is a little two-seater airplane. Two seats, a bubble canopy. They're experimental, home built. You can put it together from a kit. I don't know if you can plans build them, but probably, maybe. Um, and they have a little Rotax 912 engine, which is water cooled, and they're pretty good. They've proven to be very, very safe. A lot of airplanes use them. This was a little RV-12 taking off. Sorry. Let's zoom in so we can all follow along. I'm kidding. Okay. This was a little RV-12 taking off, and about 466 feet up, the engine just quit. The pilot did the sensible sounding thing and turned right back to land, but he came in with a gusting tailwind and got on the brakes hard, and a gust picked up the right wing. The airplane slid off the left side of the runway, and the left wing hit a taxiway sign. When they tore the engine down afterward, they found the crankshaft had broken in two. Aft of the number 2 connecting rod journal, the brake showed fatigue cracking, and it started from several spots along the radius where the journal meets the crankshaft web. Well, that's interesting, and we don't have any history on this. So we've got a couple of things going on. One is he did the impossible turn. So what we call it when you take off and then you're only a few hundred feet up and you immediately try to turn around and come back to the airfield. These little RV-12s, from what I understand, are pretty good at floating. And this all has to do with the pilot's ability to fly. It takes practice. Clearly, he made it back to the runway, so good job to him. And the problem with a gusting tailwind, which when you take off into the wind. So, of course, you turn around, now you have a tailwind, and that can affect your landing. But a broken plane on the runway, a rough landing is way better than landing in the trees. Ask me how I know. So, but what the real problem here was the crankshaft broke in two pieces. I'm wondering because that's not something that just happens. Crankshafts generally don't just break in half. There's usually some sort of damage, uh, generally a prop strike. So this is why we take prop strikes so seriously. Prop strike or a sudden stop. So say you're taxiing and the prop, you know, hits a rock, or you go into some super long grass or something and it stops the engine abruptly, because you can get these micro cracks and fractures inside the engine and they lead to failure eventually. And that's not a good thing. So that one is not good. So what's the lesson to take away? Well, let's go to the bottom. How do we keep this from happening? Here's the thing about metal fatigue. A crankshaft flexes a tiny amount on every power stroke, and if there's a stress riser somewhere, A sharp corner, a rough fillet, a nick, cracks can start there and grow a little bit each cycle until one day there isn't enough metal left to hold. You often can't see that from the outside. Wait, you can't see it from the outside. So the lesson isn't really something you fix in the cockpit. It's oil analysis, keeping an eye on any metal in the filter, taking a rough, running, or unusual vibration complaint seriously instead of writing it off. You'd rather find the crack in the shop than find it at 400 feet. So, I mean, going back to really not something, a crack in a crankshaft is not going to show up until it's broken. This is just an AI synopsis here. I didn't write this, so it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. All kinds of things can break an aircraft after a prop strike. I'm not saying this guy had a prop strike. Maybe he bought a mid-time engine to put on his experimental aircraft. He didn't buy a new one. Maybe the previous owner prop struck it and didn't say anything. Or maybe he bought it with a prop strike. Who knows? Go back here, go to the top. Let's go to the other accent of the day. Cessna 182, November 12th, 2020, mechanical failure. Unfortunately, this is a fatal injury in Los Angeles, California. Synopsis. So just to reiterate here, this here is the actual NTSB report as written. Sometimes they're boring and they don't get to the point. So let's read the synopsis, which is an AI breakdown of the official report written in more plain English. A Cessna 182 was on final approach when the pilot told the tower he'd lost engine power and was trying to make the runway. He didn't make it. The airplane hit power lines in a residential area about 175 feet short of the threshold, and a fire consumed the wreckage. When investigators went through it, they found the throttle control rod had come apart from the throttle body. The bolt, washer, castalized nut, and cotter pin that hold that joint together were all missing. There was no impact damage to the linkage. The airplane had a new engine put on it about 2 months and 78 flight hours before the accident. So, dang. This is one of those things, because when you're wrenching on these planes, some of the hardware has castalized nuts and a cotter pin. And if you don't put that cotter pin in, it doesn't have any lock washers or anything. And usually, you're torquing it down, but not necessarily like you're not cranking it down. So things are there. That's the whole point of a cotter pin. Is you tighten up the castalized nut until it's tight, and then you're lining the holes up, and so you can put the cotter pin in. I did a pre-purchase inspection on that was a Vans or no, dang it, I don't remember exactly what airplane that was, but it was a home built experimental, and and I was doing the inspection on it, and there was a missing cotter pin on the elevator linkage. So you just lose the whole elevator if that came off. And the point is, they do come off. And he had just, this mechanic that did this work's got to be beating himself up because he probably can picture at only 2 months, 7, 8 hours ago. He remembers specifically working on that plane, and he's beating himself up trying to figure out how he forgot that cotter pin. I mean, could it be the cotter pin was in there and it fell off? Sure. Is it likely? No. Not likely that a cotter pin's going to break off. So let me show you what that looks like. So this is more like a Cessna Cessna 150. This is like an 0200 engine. Anyways, the concept is exactly the same. So you got your throttle cable coming here to your carburetor throttle arm, and you'll see this here connection. That is a castle nut and a cotter pin going through it. That cotter pin comes out, the bolt comes off, the throttle linkage just falls off, and then your This is not spring loaded. The throttle is not spring loaded. My opinion, they should be um, spring loaded to wide open, but they're not. So when that comes off, your throttle's just going to settle wherever it's going to settle based on vibration or whatever. They're pretty loosey goosey. So that's that. What do we learn from that? Well, let's see what this says. This one comes down to hardware that was never properly secured after maintenance. Cast-sized nut and a cotter pin exist for exactly one reason. So a threaded connection can't back off and separate no matter how much it vibrates. Skip the cotter pin or leave the nut loose, and the joint will hold for a while. Then one day it lets go, and now the throttle isn't connected to anything. If you turn wrenches, the fix is a real second set of eyes on flight critical linkages after any engine work and a proper inspection before it flies. If you fly it, a good pre-flight and a run-up where you actually feel the controls respond can sometimes catch it. You'd rather find a loose throttle rod on the ground than on short final. So what I do, because I work on my own a lot, I don't always have someone there. I don't always have a second set of eyes. That's the gold standard, but gold standard doesn't always happen. So what I do is after I repair the aircraft or whatever it is that I'm touching, I'll walk away from it. I do something different. I'll be on my phone or put my tools away, whatnot, cleaning up. And then I go back to the airplane and I physically touch everything that I touched during the repair. I'll touch it, I'll look at it, I'll consider it. Is that correct? And then I'll touch something else. So I don't just look at it and gloss over, but I reach and actually run my hands over everything, and that kind of seems to it really directs focus and attention on double checking your own work. So I recommend that. Another thing that I do is anytime I take something apart that I'm worried, or not worried, but that it cannot be forgotten, that needs to be retorqued or put back on, I'll get some blue painter's tape and I'll make like a little a lanyard, a flag, and I'll wrap that blue tape. I can't recommend that technique enough. Even if you're working on a motorcycle or a car and there's a plug you've undone and you don't want to forget it, just get some blue painter's tape, attach it, make a flag, and then you're less likely to gloss over it. And if you are running your hands over everything that you touched for a second pass, you're going to see the blue tape. You're going to retorque it. Oftentimes, that's how these mistakes happen as you go and do something, and then there's a distraction. Maybe the guy was just putting the castle nut on and then the phone rang, or who knows, boss called him in the office, or another aircraft owner walked into the hangar and he had just torqued it up, and for whatever reason, after that distraction, in his mind, the job was done. Another story, I was doing an annual inspection on a Cessna 182. It had just come back from a avionics shop for an autopilot installation, Garmin Autopilot. This was a very popular, renowned, high-quality shop. And lo and behold, when I got into the tail, there was cotter pins missing on the elevator control cable at the elevator control horn in the tail. And that was undone because in order to install the autopilot, all that comes off, all those cables come off, and then install servos, and then things get rerouted. The cable also went over the top of a aluminum cross member that held one of the new servos on. So it was like sawing its way through. When you buy those old survival knives with caps that come off, they have a little compass on it, and they've got a little saw that's basically a braided stainless steel cable with two rings on the end so you can cut through branches. Well, that's basically what was happening to this aluminum brace for the autopilot. It was getting sawn through. So anyways, make sure hardware is put on correctly, and make sure if you have a prop strike that the engine gets torn down and everything gets sent out for inspection. So that's today's accident of the day reviews.